In a swimming pool in Hofsós on the north coast, a postman finishes his morning swim before delivering letters to a town of fewer than 200 people, every one of whom he can name. The water comes from a borehole half a kilometre down. In Reykjavik, a genealogist in a research building opens Iceland's national genealogy database. She enters two strangers' names. They share a great-great-grandfather. The lookup takes 9 seconds. In Akureyri, morning assembly at a primary school is beginning. The children sing the national anthem in Icelandic, the language Iceland's parliament has used for 1,095 years. This is Iceland. 387,000 people on a basalt island in the North Atlantic. A country small enough that its parliament keeps a public registry of every ancestor anyone has ever had. Iceland is the only country where two strangers can find their nearest common ancestor in seconds. It is also a country that on the 6th of October 2008 took control of 3 banks whose combined assets were 10 times its economy. Both things are true. What follows is daily life in a country keeping count of itself. By 8 in the morning, Reykjavik is awake. Iceland's capital holds 140,000 of the country's 390,000 people. The rest are spread along the coast in towns small enough that most have a single petrol station and a single school. The country is 103,000 square kilometers in total, an island slightly larger than Ireland, with a population the size of a mid-sized European suburb. In a room in central Reykjavik, a small civil service committee has begun its monthly meeting. It is called the Icelandic Naming Committee, and its job is to approve or reject the first names parents wish to give their children. A first name must be grammatically Icelandic, must take a genitive form, and must not be likely to embarrass the bearer. The committee meets once a month. The list of approved names runs into the thousands. Names containing letters that do not appear in the Icelandic alphabet, C, Q, W, Z, are rejected by default. Parents wishing to use them must petition for an exception. A few streets away, a researcher opens Íslendingabók on her screen. The database has been live since 1997, when Decode Genetics finished compiling it from parish registers, censuses, and oral genealogies stretching to the settlement age. The chain in the database now reaches close to 900,000 names, almost 3 times the country's living population. Most lookups between two Icelanders return a common ancestor within 7 generations. In 1980, the country elected Vigdis Finnbogadóttir as president, the first woman in the world to be elected head of state by direct national vote. She held the office for 16 years. After stepping down, she founded, at the University of Iceland, the center that now bears her name and that holds public lectures on minority languages from Faroese to Sami. Her years in office, in Icelandic public memory, are associated with the principle that the country's smallness was not its limitation, but its working condition. "250 kilometers north of the capital, across the highlands, the country's second largest city sits at the head of a fjord. Akureyri has 19,000 people, one hospital, one university, and the only population center with sustained snow cover for half the year. At 12:15 each weekday, the state broadcaster reads the country's death notices on the radio. They are read in alphabetical order by patronymic, with date and town of birth attached, so that listeners can recognize their own. "300 kilometers north of the capital, in the village of Hofsós, the postman who finished his swim has begun his round. The post office building doubles as the village shop and the village cafe. He stops at one address with a small package and a name written in pencil on the front. The shopkeeper greets him by his patronymic, son of Jon, son of Stefan, son of Karl. There is no surname in the system. There is only the chain of fathers and mothers written by hand on the package. In the high pasture above the village, a herd of 112 Icelandic horses moves down the hillside for the autumn roundup. The breed has been kept pure since the late 19th century, when the Parliament passed a law forbidding any other horse from entering the country, and any Icelandic horse from returning if it had left. Both clauses introduced to protect the closed gene pool from imported disease. Among the breed's gaits is one, a smooth, 4-beat run that holds a glass of water on the rider's saddle without spilling. By the time the postman has finished his round, the city pool, 1,000 kilometers south, has already been open for 2 hours. By 8 in Reykjavik, the morning shift at the city pool is already changing. The capital has 17 heated public pools. The smallest holds 2 lanes. The largest, on the eastern edge of the city, holds 8 lanes, plus a children's pool, plus a hot tub, plus a cold plunge tub, plus a steam room. The city pool opens at 6:30 in the morning, 6 days a week. It closes at 10 at night. The water is heated by water, the same geothermal water that heats every house in the city, drawn from boreholes near the volcanic peninsula and pumped up the hill to a holding tank, where the temperature is regulated and the water is sent on, lukewarm, through pipes that warm the streets enough that snow rarely lies on them in winter. In the pool's small cafe, an elderly woman who has just finished 30 laps is eating a bowl of skyr. Skyr is a cultured Icelandic dairy product, fermented from skim milk with a particular bacterium, known to the country since at least the 11th century and to the rest of the world only since 2006, when a small dairy in southern Iceland began exporting it. The bowl is small, made of pale grey ceramic, and is served with a wooden spoon and a square of dark rye bread, baked in geothermal sand on the shore of Lake Laugarvatn. The bread is sealed in a metal pot, buried in heated sand at the edge of a hot spring, and left for 24 hours. It tastes of the sand. The woman has been having this same breakfast at this pool 3 mornings a week since 1996. She is 83 years old. "200 kilometers southeast, in the village of Vík, the pool has just opened. Vík has fewer than 300 residents. The pool sits on a low ridge above the black sand beach of Reynisfjara, with a window facing the Atlantic. 3 swimmers are in it. The roll of the surf below is loud enough that the radio in the lifeguard's hut needs to be turned up. "300 kilometers further north and east, at the Mývatn nature baths, the morning steam comes off the milky blue water in lines that drift toward the lava field beside the road. The water at Mývatn is a byproduct of the geothermal power station 2 kilometers away. It is filtered, cooled to 38 degrees, and sent to the bath. From the steam line, the lava field looks like the surface of the moon if the moon had been worn smooth by 20,000 winters. In every Icelandic town larger than 200 people, there is a pool. The first municipal pools were built in the 1930s, after the Parliament passed an act requiring every child to learn to swim by the age of 11. The act remains in force. The pool is, in most towns, the warmest building in the village. By 12, the pools have begun their lunchtime quiet. In Reykjavik, the queue at the harborside hot dog stand is 6 people long. The order, when it comes, is a single Icelandic phrase pronounced in one breath, and it translates to "with everything." With everything is, in order, ketchup, sweet brown mustard, remoulade, raw onion, fried onion, an Icelandic lamb and pork sausage from Sláturfélag Suðurlands, a soft white roll. The stand has been open since 1937. The line, this Tuesday in October, includes a tourist from Tokyo, a delivery driver, a school leaver, and the mayor of a small town in the west of the country, whose name the man at the front does not quite catch. By the time the stand closes at 1 in the morning, the country's bookshops have already shut their doors. Their lights have been off for 2 hours. The next morning's first book is waiting on a counter in Reykjavik, unopened. By the time the road climbs west from Reykjavik over the Mosfellsheiði Heath, the air drops below freezing. The road ends at Þingvellir, 50 kilometers east of the capital. The valley here is a tectonic rift, the Eurasian and North American plates pulling apart at roughly 2 centimeters a year, and the site where, in the year 930, Icelanders meeting in convocation declared themselves a parliament. They agreed to assemble each summer at a stone outcrop in the rift. They agreed to bring their disputes to a council of representatives drawn from the regions. They agreed to abide by what was decided. The Althing, the assembly, has continued, with one 19th century interruption, ever since. It is the oldest continuous parliament in the world. For the first 3 centuries, the Assembly's decisions were memorized. They were not written down. The men who carried them in their heads were called law speakers. One of these law speakers was the historian Snorri Sturluson, who, after his term ended, retreated to a property in the west of the country called Reykholt, and began to write down what had not been written before. Snorri's hot pool at Reykholt, the one he soaked in while drafting, still survives, with its stone steps and the same hot spring feeding it. Snorri produced the Prose Edda, the closest the Norse tradition ever came to a single source text, and the Heimskringla, the saga of the Norwegian kings. He was murdered at Reykholt in 1241 by men sent from Norway in the closing phase of a power struggle in which the Norwegian crown was bringing the island under its rule. The tradition he had committed to paper survived him by 800 years. The country has, in the years since, kept writing. Iceland publishes more books per capita than any other country on Earth. Roughly 1 in 10 Icelandic adults publishes a book at some point in their life. The average Icelander reads 8 books a year. The novelist Halldór Laxness, born in 1902 in a farmhouse outside Reykjavik, won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1955, Iceland's only Nobel, for novels that took the country's poorer farms and fishing villages as their subject, and the Icelandic language as a working instrument equal to any other. He is buried at Mosfell, a churchyard within sight of the road from Reykjavik to Þingvellir. In a bookshop on Laugavegur in central Reykjavik, a clerk is unboxing the autumn arrivals. The boxes carry novels, poetry, biographies, children's picture books, sagas in modern translation, and one cookbook on geothermal baked bread. 6 weeks before Christmas, every Icelandic household will receive a printed catalogue listing every new book published in the country that year. The publishing industry releases roughly 800 new titles in those 6 weeks. The custom of receiving a wrapped book on the night of the 24th of December is called Jólabókaflóðið, the Christmas book flood. Most households unwrap on Christmas Eve, eat slowly, and read until morning. By Christmas night, the bookshop on Laugavegur has emptied its tills and partly emptied its shelves. The clerk who unboxed the arrivals locks the door at 6 o'clock and is home by 1:15. In a flat in the Vesturbær district of Reykjavik, a single lamp is on at 11:30 on December 24th. The book is open to its first page. The reader has not yet turned it. The chocolate beside the lamp is a small, flat tablet stamped with the maker's name. The room is warm. But not every book Iceland has written has been a book it would have chosen. The next chapter, Iceland did not write. It was written for it.
On the morning of the 6th of October, 2008, the Prime Minister appeared on national television and addressed the country. The address lasted 8 minutes. Geir Haarde, then in his second year as Prime Minister, told Icelanders that the state was about to take control of 3 banks, Glitnir, Kaupthing and Landsbanki, whose combined balance sheet was 10 times the size of Iceland's annual economy. The banks had borrowed enormously in foreign currency over the previous 5 years, lending in foreign currency too, and once the global credit market froze in September of that year, they could no longer roll over the euros and dollars they owed. Their krona deposits could not buy enough foreign currency to cover the gap. The country could not bail them out at the country's scale because they were larger than the country. The state took only what was owed inside Iceland. The bank's foreign creditors were left to recover what they could in court. Haarde closed the address with the words, "God bless Iceland," and the krona began losing value within hours. Over the next 5 months, it lost roughly half its purchasing power against the euro. The word for the moment in Icelandic became hrunið, the crash. In a flat above a fish and chip shop in central Reykjavik, a family had the broadcast on a small television in the corner of the kitchen. The mother was at the sink. The father was holding the youngest child. The eldest child was watching the screen. None of them said anything for a long time after the address ended. The savings account at Landsbanki contained 16 years of carefully set-aside teachers' pay. The mortgage had been taken out in Swiss francs at a low interest rate. By the following spring, the mortgage payment had risen by 60%. The teacher kept the job. The mortgage was renegotiated, eventually, through one of the country's 3 new state-owned banks, set up to hold the wreckage of the old. In the harbour, the Reykjavik fishing families went on fishing. Iceland's fishing fleet was the country's other long balance sheet. Older than the banks, smaller than the banks, more sustainable than the banks. The boats had not borrowed in foreign currency. The fish kept coming. In the year after the collapse, fish exports rose by 16%. Outside the Parliament building over the next 4 months, between 2,000 and 3,000 Icelanders gathered most weekday afternoons, banging pots, pans, and oil drums. The press named it the Pots and Pans Revolution. By February, the government had resigned. The election that followed brought a coalition led by the country's first female prime minister. In the years after, more than 24 Icelandic bankers and former bank directors were convicted of offences related to the collapse: market manipulation, breach of fiduciary duty, falsified accounts. The combined sentences handed down ran to over 70 years in prison. No other country prosecuted a comparable number of bank executives in the wake of the 2008 crisis. The Special Investigation Commission, appointed by the Icelandic Parliament, published a 9-volume, 2,400-page report in 2010, setting out in detail what each bank had done. At Keflavik Airport, departures climbed for 2 years and then stopped climbing. Roughly 5,000 Icelanders moved abroad for work, most to Norway, a smaller number to Denmark and Sweden, a few to North America. By 2014, most had returned. The country's population dropped by less than 1% at the trough and began growing again by 2011. By 2017, the krona had recovered roughly 70% of its pre-collapse value. By 2019, the country's gross domestic product had passed its 2007 peak. By 2024, Iceland was receiving more international visitors per year than its own population times 5. A different morning, 13 years later, before sunrise on a Wednesday in March 2021, an officer at the Reykjanes Geological Monitoring Station picked up the telephone. The first eruption of the new cycle had begun at Fagradalsfjall. In March 2024, the lava field on the Reykjanes Peninsula reached 140 meters from the highway and stopped. The Reykjanes Peninsula is the southwest tip of Iceland, where the Eurasian and North American plates meet the sea. It holds the international airport at Keflavik, a fishing town called Grindavik, the Blue Lagoon Spa Complex, and most of Iceland's electricity-generating geothermal stations. It is where Iceland's ground is currently doing its loudest work. Since 2021, a cluster of fissures along a single mountain, Fagradalsfjall, has erupted 7 times, with the road between Reykjavik and the airport closed and reopened on each occasion. The bus drivers along that road have learnt the rhythm. In a kitchen in a house on the eastern edge of Grindavik, a family is eating breakfast.
The radio on the small shelf above the sink is reporting the current lava advance. A photograph on the fridge shows them in 2019, before the eruptions began. 3 children, 2 parents, the same kitchen. The toast is not quite finished. 150 kilometers east, the largest ice cap in Europe by area covers nearly 10% of the country. Vatnajökull holds the volume of water that, if it melted today, would raise the world's sea level by roughly 1 centimeter. From its southern flank, the glacier Breiðamerkurjökull carves icebergs into a lagoon called Jökulsárlón, where they drift on the slow current of glacial meltwater for 2 or 3 days, sometimes longer, until they reach the sea. The icebergs that survive the journey are washed back onto a black sand beach across the road. Photographers know the beach by an English name, Diamond Beach, though the Icelanders call it the Lagoons Beach. The icebergs sit on the sand for a few hours, then melt or are taken by the next tide. In the highlands, 200 kilometers east of Reykjavik, the rhyolite mountains of Landmannalaugar fade through orange and ochre to a pale green, where moss has caught between the rocks. The road into the area is closed for 9 months of the year. In the 3 months it is open, the geothermal pool at the foot of the mountains holds at 37 degrees, the temperature of a bath, and a small crowd of walkers passes through it each evening. South of Landmannalaugar rises the volcano Hekla. Since 1970, Hekla has erupted at roughly decadal intervals, in 1970, 1980, 1991, and 2000. The mountain has been quiet since 2000. By that recent rhythm, the next eruption is overdue. The heat the ground releases has been turned, since the 1930s, into the country's domestic energy supply. Geothermal water heats 9 in every 10 Icelandic homes. The water that arrives at a Reykjavik tap leaves the ground at 80 degrees and smells faintly of sulfur. Iceland's electricity is produced almost entirely from rivers and steam, at a unit cost low enough that aluminium smelters from Norway and Switzerland have built 3 plants on Icelandic shores to take advantage of it. Back at the rift in the southwest, the Parliament's old meeting place at Þingvellir sits between 2 cliff faces that are pulling apart. The plates separate at roughly 2 centimeters a year. The site of the country's first parliament is, in a small but measurable way, no longer the same place it was when the assembly first met there in 930. The country is younger than its parliament. The land Iceland sits on is still being made. By the end of the day, the lava field on the peninsula has cooled at the edges and crusted, and the center is still red. In Hofsós, the postman has finished his second round. The Skagafjörður Bay is dark. In Reykjavik, the city pool is closing. The lifeguard turns off the lights one row at a time. In Akureyri, the radio's death notices were read 7 hours ago. The names will be repeated tomorrow. The ring road around the country runs 1,322 kilometers. Most Icelanders have driven it, but not in one trip. The Reykjanes lava field stopped 140 meters from the highway in March 2024. The road reopened in May. Iceland's parliament has met in some form for 1,095 years. Some countries are still becoming themselves. Others have been counting themselves all along. The postman walks home. The volcano on the peninsula keeps its small breath of steam.